Today we're going to talk about evidence for the existence of God. A lot of times when I'm talking to teenagers or even my adult friends, someone will say to me, how do you know God exists? Like, where's the proof that God exists? And usually what they're asking for is like scientific proof that God exists. So here's the problem. People make this analogy in their minds that the default position, like the place that you should start, if you're not sure if God exists, they think that, well, you should assume that he doesn't until there's sufficient evidence to persuade you that he does. Like somehow atheism, that's believing God doesn't exist, like that should be the starting point. But we don't do that with other reasonable propositions. We do that with ridiculous things, right? Someone will be like, well, I don't know if the spaghetti monster exists because there could be an invisible flying spaghetti monster. There's no evidence he does. There's no evidence he doesn't, right? Okay, yeah, if it's ridiculous, then you're going to need some impressive evidence to start believing in that. But if it is something that is reasonable, that rational people actually believe, then you have to look for evidence in other ways. So for example, do aliens exist? I don't know. Is there any evidence that they exist? There's some weak evidence, right? The occasional person somewhere says that they saw something, but we don't know. I don't assume that aliens don't exist. I don't start off and say, no, there's no way any alien anywhere in the universe exists because I have never seen one. And if there was an alien, I would have seen one. I don't do that, right? I don't assume that aliens don't exist just because I personally have not seen the evidence. If I'm like, I'm leaning towards no because I have this philosophy, that's okay. Or I'm leaning towards yes because I have this philosophy, that's okay. But what would persuade me that aliens actually did exist? If there was evidence, right? If there was scientific evidence that aliens exist, or if credible people that I know said that they had an experience with aliens, right? Like if someone I knew who was smart, who wasn't a whack-a-job, was like, hey, I saw a UFO, it was clearly UFO, and then little aliens, I'd be like, really? Because before, I just heard of people on the internet and on TV, and I wasn't sure if they were telling the truth, but I trust you. You don't seem crazy. Maybe aliens do exist. Well, what I want to suggest to you is this. We do have that kind of evidence for God. First of all, when people say, oh, there's no proof that God exists, what they mean is there's no scientific proof that God exists. And that's essentially true. There's scientific proof for miracles. We'll get to that later. But there's no scientific proof that God exists. You can't look through a telescope and see God. You can't look through a microscope and see a particle of God. There is a particle called a God particle, but it's not actually a particle of God, just to be clear. So when you see God particle in the news, don't be like, science has discovered evidence for God. It's not scientific evidence for God. Why can't science find God? It's the wrong tool. It's the wrong thing to find evidence for God. It'd be like if someone said, I think that there's plastic buried under the sand on this beach over here. Here's a metal detector. Go find it. And I'd be like, you see, metal detectors are the wrong tool. No, if you can't find it with the metal detector, it's not there. If it's there, the metal detector won't find it because it's the wrong tool. So if you're only going to believe in it if it's found by the metal detector, you're never going to find out if it's there or not. It's the same with God. Science is actually the wrong tool. For some reason, people have come to the conclusion that for anything to exist, there must be scientific evidence, right? They say, I'm not going to hold any conclusion that cannot be proven by science. Can you prove by science that every conclusion can be proven by science? No? Well, okay then. And so here's the thing. God is supernatural, right? We talk about the sciences, we talk about the natural sciences. They are a study of natural things. They don't study supernatural things. God is metaphysical. We talk about physics that studies physical things, but God is metaphysical. By definition, if God is real, there's no scientific evidence that God exists. There can't be. So like aliens, we have no evidence for, we have no evidence against. We have to take the position, I don't know. That's kind of your default position. I just don't know. But there are philosophical arguments for the existence of God. And then there's the witness of the people that are intelligent and rational, who say they've encountered God, had some sort of experience with God, and you got to weigh that. And then there is scientific evidence for miracles. And when you look at those three things, in my opinion, the evidence goes from, meh, I don't know, to, wow, seems like maybe, probably, God exists. Let's deal with the philosophical ones first. How did the universe begin, according to most scientists? The Big Bang Theory, right? So the Big Bang Theory is not just a popular TV show. The Big Bang Theory was that the entire mass of the entire universe was just a tiny singularity, all right? The entire mass was a dot so small you couldn't draw it, and then all of a sudden it was under so much pressure that it exploded, and 14 billion years later, we have the universe. That is kind of the theory as to where the universe came from. But the question is this: where did the dot come from? See, people used to think that maybe the dot came from, because before that there was like a big universe that like shrunk down, and that's called the Big Crunch, and then we got the dot. And then you go, well, where'd that universe come from? Oh, well, that one came from a different dot. Where'd that dot come from? A different universe. And that one, a different dot. And that one, a different universe. And you see the problem? Well, Christians are stuck in the same problem, aren't we? Right? If we're like, the dot, where did the dot come from? And we're like, well, see, the dot was created by God. Well, where'd God come from? This is a question I get all the time. Well, who created God then? And you go, let's imagine, make up a name. Bob created God. Okay, who created Bob? Olaf. Who created Olaf? Elsa. Okay, and you're just going to go back and back and back. This is what Aristotle, who lived before Jesus, he called this an infinite regress. You never get to the first cause. Aristotle said there's got to be an uncaused cause for everything else in the universe. Well, this is what we call God. In fact, God himself called himself the uncaused cause. He called himself existence. Moses, he's walking one day, he sees a burning bush. Burning bush is like, yo, you got to set my people free. Go talk to Pharaoh. And Moses is like, okay, burning bush, which God are you? Ra? Are you the God of the sun? Are you Anubis? Are you God of death? Are you the God of lightning? Are you the God? What are you the God of? Who are you? And the voice from the bush answers and says, I am. Right, this word that's get written down as YHWH, some people think it's pronounced Yahweh, but we actually don't even know for sure how to pronounce it. Basically, what the voice answers is, I am the God of existence. I am who I am, or I am existence, or something. It's existence. See, this is who God is. This is who, as Christians, we believe God is. So catch this. This is now kind of this funny thing, because how do you know that God exists? Well, what is God? Existence. So here's the question you're asking me. How do you know that existence exists? Because it exists, right? Look around me. Stuff exists. How could anything exist if existence doesn't exist? Existence has to exist for anything to exist, and existence has to exist by its nature. Nothing can exist before existence exists. If you're going to be like, yo, who created God? And I'll be like, Bob. How could Bob exist if existence doesn't exist yet? Existence has to exist before anything else can exist. Why does existence exist? I don't know. But it's the nature of existence to exist. Now somebody's going to be like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You trying to hurt my brain and convince me that all this stuff is true just because I can't think through everything you just said. Okay, fine. Look, it's kind of this trick that philosophers do where it's like, play with the words. But the reality is what Christians think God is existence. So if you don't believe in God, what you're saying is, I think existence exists, I just don't think existence is loving and rational. Whereas as Christians, we think existence is loving and rational because that's what we mean by God, existence, and God is love, and God is truth, right? Rational. Okay, so that's what we think God is. If you don't think that, then things are arbitrary and random or whatever, okay? And so now we have somewhere to build from there. But the point is that philosophically we could say we know God exists because God is existence and existence has to exist, and clearly it does exist. What about the evidence of witnesses? See, so many people out there believe in God, so many rational people. When people try to use the allegory that believing in God is like believing in the flying spaghetti monster. Look, I don't believe in the flying spaghetti monster, and I don't know of anyone that does. But if someone intelligent that I knew believed in the flying spaghetti monster and claimed to encounter the flying spaghetti monster, I would doubt their intelligence, doubt their sanity. But what if hundreds of people did? What if millions did? Do you know that the majority of people in the world believe in God, or at least the supernatural? The vast majority. Even in Canada, even in the United States, the majority of people believe in God. And so this isn't some ridiculous, irrational thing. Obviously, it's possible to be a rational person and to believe in God. And many of those millions of people claim to have had an encounter with God. So I can't just dismiss it. What about, I said before, there is scientific evidence for miracles. Now, look, I don't think aliens have come to Earth, okay? I think maybe aliens existed. But if you wanted to persuade me that they did, you know what you could do? Present evidence, because aliens aren't supernatural, so there could be scientific evidence for them. So here's the kind of evidence that you could present. If the aliens came to Earth, what if you said, well, look, here is video of a UFO and everybody can see it, and you can tell that this is not Dr. I don't know if you can still tell that nowadays with computer graphics, but maybe you could authenticate that this is genuine video footage of a UFO. What if you had pieces of the UFO? What if you had a large number, millions of rational people who said that they had witnessed this UFO or had an encounter? You'd start eventually saying, the evidence is starting to build in favor. And even if I personally have never seen aliens, the evidence out there certainly leads me towards believing in aliens. We have that kind of evidence for Christianity. We have physical evidence that Christ existed. There's something called the Shroud of Turin. Dude, if that thing is real, people think that it's a photograph of Jesus rising from the dead. Remember I said we need authentic video evidence, okay, that you could authenticate? They've looked at this thing and most of the evidence points to it being authentic. The one that they're struggling with is the dating, but even there, when they look into it, they're like, is this thing really a 2,000-year-old? What it is, it's supposed to be the cloth Jesus was wrapped in, and they think when he rose from the dead, his image got burned onto it. It appears to be an authentic photograph of the moment that Jesus rose from the dead. What about the large number of people that all saw it? We've got something called Fatima, where at least 30,000 people, estimates go up to 100,000 people, well, let's just say 40,000 people all saw the sun dancing when they were seeking a miracle because a girl had told them that there was going to be a miracle. So we have miracles that the Catholic Church thinks are authentic, that were witnessed by tens of thousands of people. What about physical things? We've got physical relics of Jesus' time, all right? We have ongoing miracles where people are being healed on a regular basis at places like Lourdes. We have Our Lady of Guadalupe. I don't have time to get into all the miracles in this presentation, but listen, there is a lot of evidence for miracles. So the reality is when people say things like, there's no proof that God exists, yeah, there is. There's actually plenty of evidence. And what they should be doing is taking the same attitude we do towards aliens, right? We say, I don't know if aliens exist because I haven't seen evidence for or against, and I can apply my philosophy, but I don't know. But when there is evidence, and all of a sudden there are physical artifacts, there are reliable photos or videos, there are tens of thousands of witnesses, it starts leaning you towards believing. There is a guy called Blaise Pascal. And Pascal was a mathematician who lived in France, and he was a Christian philosopher as well. And Pascal said this. He said, listen, if you don't know, okay, if you know that God doesn't exist, don't pretend he exists, okay? That would be kind of a lack of integrity. But if you don't know if God exists, you're like, I just don't know. Pascal said, you're better off acting as if he does. Because if God exists and you act like he exists, praise God. You're going to get to be with God forever in heaven. If God doesn't exist and you act like God exists, well, you didn't lose anything. Christians are living very happy, satisfied lives. In fact, in Canada and the United States, in these Western societies, Christians are consistently ranked as having more satisfying, more meaningful lives than atheists. What if God doesn't exist and you're right because you don't believe in God? You didn't gain anything from that. But what if God does exist and you don't believe in him? You might have lost the opportunity to have an eternal relationship with the creator of the universe. That is huge. All of life hinges on this question. Does God exist? At some point, what we have to do as Christians is make a leap of faith. We say, okay, I started at I don't know. I saw all this evidence over here that leads me towards thinking God exists. I saw some evidence over here that leads me towards not knowing whether he exists, maybe disbelieving in him. I'm going to weigh it, and you got to make a choice at some point and say, where are we going to go? That's what faith does. Faith says, based on the evidence that we have, do we think that the testimony of Christ and of his church is reliable or not? I obviously think that the testimony of the church is reliable. You yourself are going to have to journey it. You're going to have to weigh those things. My prayer for you is that you be open-minded, be honest, and continue to seek God, because God promised that if you seek him, you will find him. God bless you.